Welcome to History Love, where we explore the stories, people, and events that shaped our world. Let's dive into the past and uncover history's most fascinating moments. First Battle of Bull Run. The first clash, Bull Run. The summer sun hung heavy over northern Virginia on July 21, 1861, as two armies prepared to face off near a quiet stream called Bull Run. This was the first major battle of the American Civil War, a conflict that would reshape the nation. For now, though, it was an uncertain beginning, a test of resolve and strategy. The stakes were high. For the Union, the goal was clear: a swift, decisive blow that would demonstrate their dominance and bring a quick end to the rebellion. For the Confederacy, it was a chance to prove their mettle and defend the South's claim to independence. The battlefield itself, Manassas Junction, was no random choice. This crucial railroad hub was the gateway to the South and the road to Richmond, the Confederate capital. Whoever controlled the rails controlled the war's momentum. The armies gather. In Washington, D.C., the air was thick with tension. President Abraham Lincoln's call for volunteers had rallied thousands of eager soldiers, but they were raw and untested. Across the Potomac, the Confederate forces were gathering strength under the watchful eye of their commanders. General P.G.T. Beauregard, stationed at Manassas Junction, awaited the Union's advance with a force of 20,000. To the west, General Joseph E. Johnston guarded Harper's Ferry, ready to march to Beauregard's aid if needed. Both sides knew the importance of the coming battle, but neither fully understood the ferocity it would unleash. The march to battle. Union General Irvin McDowell led his army of 30,000 southward from Washington on July 16, the cry of "On to Richmond" ringing in his ears. His orders were to push Beauregard's forces back and open the road to the Confederate capital. Yet the march was slow and chaotic. Supplies lagged behind, and the heat sapped the soldiers' strength. Meanwhile, the Confederates were not idle. Messages flew via telegraph to Richmond, warning of the Union's movements. Johnston, cleverly evading a larger Union force under General Robert Patterson, used the Manassas Gap Railroad to rush 10,000 reinforcements to Beauregard. By the time McDowell's troops arrived, the Confederates were ready. The battle unfolds. At dawn on July 21, the Union Army launched its attack. McDowell's plan was bold, a flanking maneuver around the Confederate left. But delays and miscommunications plagued the Union forces. Beauregard and Johnston, now working together, adjusted their defenses, moving men to meet the attack. The fighting was fierce. Cannons roared and musket volleys filled the air. Union troops surged forward, pushing the Confederates back toward Henry Hill. For a moment, it seemed victory was within reach. Then, a name that would become legendary in Southern lore entered the fray. "There stands Jackson like a stone wall," cried Confederate General Barnard B., pointing to General Thomas J. Jackson, who held firm under relentless Union fire. The Confederates rallied, their lines stiffening under Jackson's example. From that moment, Stonewall Jackson became a symbol of Southern resistance. Chaos and retreat. As the day wore on, Confederate reinforcements arrived, tipping the scales. The Union lines faltered, then broke. Soldiers who had marched confidently just days before now fled in panic, their retreat becoming a chaotic rout. Back in Washington, the hope for a quick Union victory lay shattered. The Confederate Army, bloodied but unbowed, had proved their resolve. For both sides, the battle was a sobering glimpse of the long, brutal war ahead. A nation forever changed. The first Battle of Bull Run was not the swift and decisive conflict many had envisioned. Instead, it was a grim reminder of the war's cost. The fields near Bull Run, once quiet, now bore the scars of cannon fire and the memories of fallen soldiers. The war would rage for 4 more years, but this battle, the first great clash, had set the stage for a struggle that would define a nation. The turning point at Henry House Hill. By the time Union troops reached Sudley Ford on July 21, the morning sun had already climbed high. General Irvin McDowell, taking personal command of the critical flanking maneuver, found his inexperienced soldiers delayed and disorganized. Hours behind schedule, they began crossing the ford, unaware of the resistance awaiting them. Confederate Colonel Nathan Shanks Evans, guarding the stone bridge with a mere 15 companies, quickly realized that the Union attack there was a feint. With remarkable decisiveness, he moved most of his men to Matthews Hill, above Sudley Springs, where he joined forces with Brigadier Generals Barnard B. Francis Bartow and Thomas Jackson. At 9:15 a.m., the first shots rang out. McDowell's troops, weary but determined, were met with fierce Confederate resistance. For 2 hours the two sides clashed in the fields and woods. McDowell's flanking strategy eventually forced Evans, B. and Bartow to fall back in disarray to Henry House Hill. However, Jackson's brigade stood like an immovable force, earning him the name that would echo through history. "There stands Jackson like a stone wall," shouted B, rallying his men for one final stand. "Let us determine to die here and we will conquer. Rally behind the Virginians." Tragically, B and Bartow fell in battle, their leadership extinguished in the chaos. The fight for Henry House Hill. By early afternoon, the battle's focus shifted to Henry House Hill, where Confederate forces entrenched themselves. McDowell brought up 2 artillery batteries hoping to break their lines, but misfortune struck. A Confederate regiment, mistaken for Union troops, was allowed to approach unchallenged. When they opened fire, they silenced the Union guns in a devastating volley. The hill became a scene of chaos, taken and retaken in brutal close-quarters fighting. At 2:45 p.m., the tide turned decisively. Jackson, now commanding reinforcements, led his brigade in a fierce bayonet charge. Union lines, already strained, began to crumble. As Jackson's men surged forward, the last of General Joseph E. Johnston's brigades, arriving fresh from the railway, joined the fight. The Confederates' combined assault shattered the Union forces. McDowell's army, already retreating, broke into a full-scale rout. Confederate artillery thundered after them, turning the retreat into a panicked flight toward the safety of the Potomac River. Aftermath and lessons learned. The First Battle of Bull Run ended in a stunning Confederate victory, but the cost was steep. McDowell's army of 28,450 suffered heavy losses, 460 killed, 1,124 wounded, and over 1,300 missing or captured. Confederate casualties, while lighter, were not insignificant, 387 killed and 1,582 wounded. The battle's impact reached far beyond the numbers. For the South, the victory bred overconfidence. Many believed that one Southerner truly could defeat 10 Yankees, a hubris that would shape their strategy in the months to come. In the North, the defeat was a harsh awakening. The humiliation of Bull Run galvanized the Union, transforming their disorganized enthusiasm into steely resolve. General George McClellan was called to Washington to rebuild and train the Army of the Potomac, laying the groundwork for a disciplined and determined fighting force. Meanwhile, Johnston and his Confederates forged the Army of Northern Virginia, a force whose name would become synonymous with Southern defiance. Bull Run was not just the first major battle of the war, it was a crucible. The fields near Manassas, soaked in blood and scattered with the remnants of battle, bore witness to the grim reality of a conflict that would consume the nation for years to come. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history. If you love this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to History Love. Together, let's keep the love for history alive. See you in the next chapter.